Good day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I am your host, Attorney Anthony Reeves, and it's always a pleasure to have you with me today. As always, you can always reach out to me at www.reevesfirm.com, or you can subscribe to my blog, which of course covers different topics, at legalbeat.anthonyreeves.com. As you may notice on both pages, you do have the ability to sign up for a free claim evaluation. So if you are interested in doing so at that time, please feel free to fill out the form and someone from my office will contact you in due course. Now, also, just to let you know, if you want to follow me on Facebook, of course, it's Facebook Reeves Firm, Reeves Law Firm. If you have Twitter, it's of course /legal goal. And as always, if you have any questions, you can always hit me up at anthony@reevesfirm.com. And if you're not sure about all those different places, just start with www.reevesfirm.com and it'll direct you to everywhere you need to go. All right, let's get crack-a-lacking. We got a few questions here that are more procedural based. Four of them deal with pay, and the fifth deals with medical records. So I'm going to go kind of backwards. I'm going to use the last one first because it's only one question in one particular area. Someone asked, does Social Security always send medical records to the Disability Determination Services, or what we refer to as DDS, that are given to SSA by the claimant? Short answer, they should. Short answer, they are supposed to. Long answers is, well, sometimes not always. Now, I'm going to tell you that Social Security is usually very good about doing that. But this is what I tell people all the time. Social Security makes the ultimate decision of whether you're disabled, but pretty much most states have a state agency that's responsible for doing the medical development. So if your case is at a point where it's the initial level or recon level, whether it's the medical determination portion that's going on, if you take medical records to Social Security, they should send them to DDS. Let me tell you the easiest thing for you to do. If you've got medical records and you want to make sure that the person's responsible for working on your case gets them, contact Social Security and ask them which DDS unit has your file and can you get a phone number. And then call them and they will tell you what you need to do to get the records to them. Because the last thing you want to do is be in a situation where you give medical records to them and they don't find their way to your file. Secondly, when you have records that you want DDS or the medical determination unit to have, make sure you keep a copy for yourself. In the off chance you send those to Social Security and they don't make it to them, you can always say, make sure you get it to them. Here's why I say that. Because usually at the DDS unit that's responsible for evaluating your claim from a medical standpoint, they're going to be sending you paperwork with their phone number and their fax number and their barcodes and all that information anyway. So what you do is that if you drop your medical records off with Social Security, and then maybe a few weeks or a month or so later you get a letter from DDS, you can call DDS and say, hey, I provided these records to Social Security. Is it in my file? If they tell you yeah, then you're straight. If they tell you no, guess what? You just resend it to them. No harm, no foul. You've covered yourself both ways. All right. The next four questions all could really be lumped together because it really talks about something that a lot of people want to know about: back pay. Meaning, when you get approved, you're at that hammer time moment where you've been approved. It's about getting your money. And like what most people, you're trying to figure out how this actually works. Here's a couple of ways I'm going to break it down here. First of all, people ask the question, how does Social Security calculate your back pay? Well, your back pay is calculated from the start point is the date in which you're determined to be disabled, meaning not the actual onset date, but the day they make the decision, oh, okay, we decide you're disabled. So let's say you apply for disability on January 1, 2010, and they make their disability determination that you're disabled today. And today, whatever date you see this video, for our purposes, today is July 17th. Well, the date you start going backwards for back pay is today's date because this is the date they determine. Now, the date you really want to know is the date of, you got to know is the onset date of disability and the date of the application. Those are two dates that are very important to you. So let's use the example that I provided. Let's say you've never applied for Social Security ever, and your first time you applied is January 1, 2010. Okay, you've gone through the process and yada, 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 and you get approved today. and you allege that your onset date of disability is, let's just say, January 1, 2009. Everybody with me so far? First thing we need to ask is, if there are no prior applications, then it's the first time, then there's nothing to worry about in terms of prior app. Here's the first question. What type of application is it? Is it an SSI, Supplemental Security Income? Okay, then for purposes of calculating back pay, you can only get paid from the date of your application. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that even though the Social Security found you disabled January 1, 2009, you can only get benefits starting when? January 1, 2010. So your back pay will be from today to January 1, 2010. For calculating it, if you're trying to figure out, well, how much money am I going to get? That's a resource-based question, meaning they have to do a resource interview to determine how much your financial need was during that time period. The most you can get, I believe, under SSI used to be like $670 or $680 a month. So that's the most you can get. But remember, if you've got extra assets, you got family members or friends who you're living with, who they're paying more things, that's going to drop the amount of money that you may be eligible for under SSI. So for purposes of back pay, that's what you're looking at. Now, let's assume you have what we call DIB. That's what we call disability insurance benefits. First, people, let me make one point abundantly clear about DIB as well as SSI. No two people are the same, because your resources are different from someone else's. Just like in DIB, that is a fixed number based on what money you've paid into the system, and they calculate it differently. They usually may look at your highest year earnings. They may look at that last year, but they've already calculated. That's a number that's already been calculated. And for those of you who are not sure what that number is, you get notified about it almost every year. Well, they tell you this is how much money you're entitled to if you're found to be disabled. Now, for that program, you are entitled to receive benefits up to a year prior to the application. What does that mean when you say up to? Well, let's say in the example I just gave you, I said January 1, 2010 is when I applied. Well, let's say I said I was disabled January 1, 2008. Am I going to get disability benefits all the way back to 2008? No. At most, I'm going to get up to what? A year prior to the application. So if I applied January 1, 2010, I alleged that I was disabled January 1, 2008, the most I'm going to get is January 1, 2009, because I can only get up to a year before. Now, here's the other thing you also need to be aware of. Let's use the example that I provided. January 1, 2010 is when I applied. I was found disabled January 1, 2009. They have what we call a 5-month waiting period that they automatically tap on your disability benefits for DIB. So that means even though I was found disabled January 1, 2009, 2009, my disability benefits do not become effective until 5 months after that. So that's January 1, that's February, March, April, May. That means that my back pay will not be until June 1, 2009. So I will get back pay from June 1, 2009 all the way to July 17, 2011. Make sense? Hope so. If it is, we're good. If not, you can always ask me for clarification. Concurrent applications. Oh, those are the fun ones. Those are the ones where you've applied and you're eligible for SSI and SSD, or DIB as I refer to it. And the same calculations that I referred to still apply. One little switch though. SSI being a resource-based program, what's going to happen is that SSI will be adjusted by whatever monies you get from any other source, including DIB. So guess what? If you're getting SSI, let's say your SSI is maxed at $670, $680 a month, and you're entitled to receive DIB at like $200 a month. Well, that means you're going to get $200 from DIB, $480 from SSI because they're going to drop it. Well, let's say you have a jam in PIA. Let's say your PIA is like $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month. You know what that means for you? No SSI, because your DIB is going to cancel it out. Okay? Now, somebody says, how far will they go back in terms of payments? Of course, as I just indicated, it depends on the application, and it depends on the application, the onset date of disability, as well as how far back he's gone. So that's what they look at. Okay, now how does SSI work in terms of payment? We just covered that. And then somebody says, how does a prior application affect my back pay benefits? Oh, lovely. Now, a couple of things that you need to be aware of. And let me make sure I hit this one little caveat. It is possible, because the example that I gave you was a nice, neat application. It is possible that you could get disability benefits being altered because of when they determine you were disabled. Well, here's what I mean by this. Let's say I applied for disability benefits, I gave you the nice neat one, of January 1, 2010. I alleged that I was disabled on January 1, 2009. Okay, you're with me so far. What if Social Security determines that I became disabled June 1st? Excuse me, let me keep it neat. Let's say Social Security determined I became disabled January 1, 2011. Now follow the math here. Originally, I applied on June 1, 2010. I said I was disabled January 1, 2009. Social Security says I'm disabled January 1, 2011. What does that mean? Well, January 11, 2011 would be the date that controls all payments. So for those of you who are like, well, does that mean I get paid on my application date for SSI going back to January 1, 2010? No. Think about it now. How are they going to pay you for 2010, but they didn't find you disabled until 2011? They're not. So that means January 1, 2011 becomes the controlling date. That means for purposes of SSI, even though I applied January 1, 2010, they didn't find me disabled until January 1, 2011. So that's when I'm going to start getting paid for SSI. For DIB, depending on if I'm still covered for insurance disability coverage, move ahead 5 months again. That means I don't start seeing DIB payments until, guess what, June 1, 2011. Yes, I know it's confusing. That's why I tell people when they ask, how does your back pay work? And I always say it's never as neat as you'd like. It all depends on the date you apply, the date of the onset that you allege, and the date Social Security determined you were disabled, and the date they determined your disability began. Now, prior applications. Prior applications are not neat. And this is what I mean when I say this. First and foremost, the short answer is this. If Social Security recognizes you have a prior application but does not reopen that prior reapplication, you're out of gas. So this is really a moot point. Doesn't matter a thing about that application. So that's the first thing that you need to be aware of. Second thing you need to be aware of is that for purposes of prior applications, if the application, the fund date you need to know is this. When you filed an initial application and it's denied, if you file a new application within a year of that denial, they typically reopen that application, that prior application, without any problems. If it's longer than that, for SSI, it means it's greater than, I believe it's up to 2 years, and DIB up to 4 years. You have to give them a reason why you did not appeal it for them to reopen it, meaning Social Security has to grant permission for you to reopen it. Now, there's a couple of different reasons for that, and we'll talk about that later. If you want more, I'll be more than happy to. But here's what you need to know. If Social Security makes a determination that you have a prior application and they agree to reopen that application, then they will look at that date as being controlling, as well as the onset date that you listed in that as being controlling. So let's say, for instance, in the example that I gave, you were found to be disabled. You alleged an application of January 1, 2011. And then I said, well, my prior application, prior onset date is January 1, 2010. Well, let's say I had another application that I made in January 2009, and I said I was disabled back in 2008. If they reopened that application in 2009, guess what? I get the benefit of that 2008 onset date. That actually gives me a greater period of time to cover. So the reality is, in order for you to know whether you're covered by a prior application, you need to know that ahead of time so that you can determine how much of that back pay is being calculated. All right, people, as always, it was a pleasure having you here today. I hope this was informative. If you need me to give a greater discussion about the prior applications, I'd be more than happy to do so. This is Anthony Reeves, and this is your Q&A, Social Security Disability Today.